students. Welcome back to the next session on operations planning, scheduling and control. Now let's begin with our learning. In this particular session, the learners will be able to understand or will be dealing with the concept of flow shop, the learning objectives. At the end of this particular session, the learners will be able to understand what do we mean by or what is the definition of flow shop, what are the various activities that are being undertaken in terms of flow shop, and how flow shop can be implemented in a certain organization. Now let's understand the basic meaning of flow shop. Initially, we have seen what do we mean by a job shop activity. So job shop activity is a consideration wherein a particular task or a particular activity which is of a smaller importance or of a smaller nature, how it can be brought in or how it can be implemented in the organization, and how a series of activities can be undertaken. In terms of a flow shop is dealing with the consideration of the line layout, which deals with how the lining or the series of activities can be planned in an organization. Those particular series of activities always needs to be undertaken based on the facility arrangement at the shop floor that is available. So based on the arrangement at the shop floor level, the series or sequence of activities needs to be planned, and accordingly those activities needs to be completed. So flow shop or a line layout is a certain series of activities which looks or takes into consideration the same processing path that can be undertaken in the business organization. Now let's take an example at this particular stage, that is in a particular organization when the machines are being organized as machine A, machine B, machine C and machine D, in which there is a free flow of movement of goods and services as and when it is been required. That is, a product can move from machine A to machine B, machine A to machine C, or machine A to machine D. So in this case, there is a proper flow of goods and services within the organization, and hence such type of flow of material, such type of flow of goods and services in the organization is the concept of flow shop. That another example that you can see here is, now let's take example that is machine C or machine D. So in case of machine C, one can identify and we can easily see that the material or the goods can easily move from machine C to machine A, or machine C to machine D, or machine C to machine B. So a proper arrangement or sequence of activities is into existence, and accordingly the goods are being moving in a proper sequential manner. And based on the sequential manner, one has to make an arrangement of respective facilities about how the product or line layout activity can be undertaken in the business organization. Now let's understand the procedure or flow of activity that has been performed in the flow shop. So the flow shop, that is, there are three diagrams. So the activities that we can see here in this stage, that is, the first is the strict flow shop, or that is a flow shop activity, a job shop activity, and the project shop activity. So in terms of a strict flow shop activity, there is always a sequence or a series of machines, and all the activities are being conducted in a specified assembly line. That is, the goods are being moving from one machine to another machine, that is number 2, that is in the first diagram that you can see here. So here in this particular case, this is machine 1, this is machine 2, and this is machine 3. So for those particular concern, the goods are being moving in a straight sequential line, that is a strict flow shop activity, that is from machine 1 to machine 2, machine 2 to machine 3. In the another example, flow shop with a certain exception. Now in case that you feel that a particular activity is not compulsory, it is not mandatory, and a certain flow shop with a certain exception or a certain bypass needs to be provided. So here in this case, for a red color, which is an important activity, the activity can move from machine 1 to machine 2 and then machine 2 to machine 3. In another sequence or another case, if you feel that is a blue color line wherein you can see the machine needs to be moving from machine 1 to directly to machine 3 and it does not pass on from machine 2. So here in this case, the machine activity or the series of activities in the assembly line passes directly from machine 1 to machine 3. In a certain next another sequence or series of activities in which the goods have been moving from machine 1 to machine 2, then machine 2 to machine 3, and again it is coming back for the processing or the further movement. So that's the concept of job shop with a certain exception. Sorry, a flow shop with a certain exception. Another example that you have is the concept of job shop. In terms of the job shop activity, you can see that the series of activities can be completed as and when it is been required, and how the need of activities in terms of sequence or series can be undertaken. That is from machine 1 to machine 2 to machine 3, and then accordingly the sequence or series of activities can be undertaken, and hence the movement of goods and services is being there in a specified position. In this case, the machine can either be imported or it can be transferred from one level to another level, and accordingly, the series in terms of a series of a sequence of activities, we can see that initially that is the red color line, that is the machine or the goods moving from one level to another level. It is in a sequential way, but in a lateral stage, there is no sequential that has been observed, either a strict flow or a strict flow with exceptions, and accordingly, the goods have been moving from one level to another level. Another stage that you can see is with respect to the project shop activity. In terms of a project shop activity, there are sequence or there are series of activities that have been undertaken, and here in this case, the goods have been moving from different directions only at one single machine that is into existence. And hence, for those particular consideration, the procedure with respect to the job shop, flow shop, and project shop differs from product to product and machine to machine. Be completed. So now let's see what are the various basics that have been associated. The line activity, the facility arrangement, the process of job shop always deals or differs from product to product, individual to individual, and category to category. Another important perspective that one has to understand or realize is with respect to the excellent repetitive production. So at a certain stages, the production activity that may be undertaken in the job shop or the flow shop may be a repetitive nature or may be of a non-repetitive nature. So depending on the significant quantity of input that has been provided, one has to understand that whether the job shop activity or the flow shop activity that has been implemented is of a prioritization nature and at what duration it needs to be completed. It is always simpler to regulate the flow of employment in this instance, but it is always difficult to adopt a new product diversity. So when the machinery or the organization is moving towards the product diversity, so at this particular stage, the product moves or needs to be moving on from one product to another product, one level to another level, and from those particular consideration, the employment opportunities are also created in a better way. The another consideration or the basic terminology with respect to the flow shop is each machine or a facility has a distinct operation time. That is, when you conduct a certain activity, there are different types that have been time that has been allocated to each and every individual task. So, based on the task that has been assigned, the assembly line needs to be organized, and accordingly, the job shop activity needs to be completed. So, for a certain consideration about how the activity can be completed, in what duration or time frame the activity needs to be completed, the assembly line needs to be organized, and the balancing or sequencing of activities needs to be conducted. Now let's take an example of a flow shop. So in general, a flow shop and its various versions, that is the assembly line, the transfer line, and the so on, are a resultant of activity of movement of goods and services from one level to another level. In case of a certain consideration, that is an example of a manufacturing unit. In case of an aircraft industry, whether it may be a Boeing, whether it may be an Airbus, and whether it may be a shipping goods or massive ship engines. So for those particular consideration, the series of activities are always planned in a certain sequence, and all the activities needs to be completed as and when the time arises. So for a certain series of activity or a part of an activity, there is maximum number of time that is involved, or for a certain point or a series of activities, there is minimum amount of time that has been involved, and hence such type of activity needs to be completed as and when the need arises. Now let's understand what are the various assumptions with related to the job shop activity. With respect to the job shop activity, the various assumptions that have been associated is number one, including the non-permutation scheduling. So here in this case, it has been always assumed that the non-permutation scheduling is into existence and it is not implied in the organization. So a proper sequence or a series of activities can be conducted, but in case the certain series of activities cannot be performed, it will not hamper the job or the business activity of a certain organization, and hence it get replaced with some another activity or series of activities that can be conducted. The next example or the next assumption is the learning effect. Always the industry or a job shop activity is aiming for conducting the learning effect which has been implemented in the business organization. The learning effect is always focusing on a certain consideration that the participants of the job has to. The another learning effect that has been associated with the job shop is how those particular series of activities, the learning effect of activities can be completed in a specified time period. The another assumption based of the job shop or the flow shop activities, multiple variability constraints. So there may be various different types of constraints with related to a certain type of activity or the series of activities that can be implemented in the business organization. The releases time. The time for each and every single activity may be a specific time, maybe a different time, and so on. So always the release times of a different products or different types of activities differs. Now let's understand what are the various types of flow shop scheduling. Number 1, the branch and the bound scheduling. Number 2, the dynamic programming. Number 3, the heuristic algorithm. And number 4, the meta heuristics approach. So these are the various different types of approaches to the job shop or the flow shop activity. Now, what are the various three types of process flow diagram? With respect to the process flow diagram, number 1, we have the process flow chart, the swim lane flow chart, and lastly, the workflow diagram. In terms of a process flow chart, there is a proper process or a sequence and a series of activities, and the activities have been completed in a specified sequence. With the swim lane flow chart, there is a proper swimming or there is a flow of activities in a proper concern, but in a line way or in a specified path that has been provided. In a workflow activity, the work has been designed as per the prioritization, and accordingly, the work needs to be completed as and when the task gets achieved. Now, what do we mean by the flow shop scheduling? So, flow shop scheduling is a type of job shop scheduling which can be undertaken in the organization, and all the operational activities are being conducted within a specified time period. So, for a completion of a certain activity, certain orders of all the project needs to be created, and accordingly, the flow shop scheduling activity needs to be undertaken. What does it compute? It computes as all the facilities that have been undertaken and how those considerations can be identified in a business organization. A flow shop scheduling may be applied to both the organization, that is, to the service organizations as well as to the manufacturing organizations. Now let's understand what do we mean by ultimately the flow shop activity. So in general, a flow shop is a various versions of assembly line, transfer lines, and so on, and how enormous benefit can be created to a certain organization. It may be a benefit to a manufacturing concern, a service industry, and so on. So hence, a series of activities needs to be planned and should be seen at how those activities are being completed in the specified time period. Now let's summarize what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we have understood what do we mean by a flow shop, what are the various activities that have been conducted in a flow shop with respect to the goods and services, and lastly, how do we implement a flow shop in a particular organization. Now, I hope you must have enjoyed the learning at this particular session. Thank you for your patience listening. Thank you.